Now that we understand some of the theory behind the big three cam specs, let's take a look at some cam specification charts. In this chart, we have the big three specifications for 5 S&S cam grinds for 2007 to 17 Harley-Davidson twin cam 96 and 103 engines. The first 4 are bolt-in cams since the lifts are not over 585. These cams will work well with stock cylinder heads, although porting the heads will certainly improve the performance. The 5th grind is a high lift cam and will require the use of special high lift valve springs. This cam is designed for larger displacement engines and will only deliver its full potential with ported heads. Now let's take a look at the timing specs. The first cam is the S&S OES Original Equipment Specification cam. This one is basically a stock replacement camshaft with the same specs as a stock cam, so we can use it as a baseline to compare the other cams to. Let's take a look at the intake opening and closing times. Performance cams always open the intake valve before top dead center on the exhaust stroke. That's why that column of the chart by default indicates before top dead center numbers. But not this cam. The -9 in the column indicates that the valve opens 9 degrees after top dead center. So the piston has already started moving down the cylinder on the intake stroke. All the other cams open the intake valve before top dead center. So why do the OES and stock cams open it after top dead center? The reason is emissions compliance. Keeping the intake valve closed until after top dead center, and in fact until after the exhaust valve is closed, is a way of reducing hydrocarbon emissions. It's nearly impossible for any unburned gasoline to be sucked all the way through the combustion chamber and out the exhaust pipe by the vacuum created by the escaping exhaust gases, since the exhaust valve is already closed. The OES cam closes the intake valve at 25 degrees after bottom dead center on the compression stroke, so it does take some advantage of the continued airflow into the cylinder after the piston has changed direction. The intake duration of the OES cam is 196 degrees. Easy to calculate from the numbers. It opens at 9 degrees after top dead center. Bottom dead center is 180 degrees from top dead center, so when the piston reaches bottom dead center, the valve has been open for 171 degrees. The valve closes at 25 degrees after bottom dead center, so we add the 171 and the 25 to come up with 196 degrees of duration. If the intake valve had opened before top dead center, we'd have added that number to the 180 degrees instead of subtracting the 9 degrees as we did in this case. Let's compare the OES cam with the S&S 551 cam. The 551 has 550 lift, which is definitely higher than the 474 lift of the OES cams. That makes sense. More air, more power. The intake closing time of the 551 cam is actually 6 degrees earlier than the OES and hence stock cams. That may seem a little odd, but remember that the 551 was designed to improve torque. It does that by closing the intake valve earlier. More air is captured in the cylinder, combustion chamber pressure is increased, so the engine makes more torque at lower RPM. You may wonder why, in spite of an earlier intake closing time, the 551 cam has more intake duration than the stock cam. That's because the intake valve opens 26 degrees earlier. Looking at the MR103 cam specs, we see that the intake closing time is quite a bit later than the OES and stock cams, and it has 30 degrees more intake duration. The MR103 is a mid-range cam that's designed to improve performance across the entire RPM range without an emphasis on torque or top-end horsepower, and that's exactly what it does. Comparing the HP103 cam with the MR103, we see quite an increase in intake closing time and duration. The HP103 is a horsepower cam. It's designed to maximize the top-end horsepower of an otherwise stock 103 cubic inch engine. So the intake closing time is later, but it's not extreme. After all, the HP103 has to work in a stock displacement engine with stock compression. Comparing the HP103 cams to the 675 cams, there's a big jump in both intake closing time and duration. The 65 is also a horsepower cam, but unlike the HP103, it was designed for large displacement, high compression engines. The high lift and the radical timing are going to work well in that application. If you were looking for a cam for your stock engine and you chose the 675 because of the big numbers, you would be sadly disappointed in the results. And you would have spent a lot of extra money on parts and labor to install the cam. This cam requires high lift valve springs, roller rocker arms, adjustable push rods, and you'll need head gaskets since you'll have to pull the heads to install the springs. Is it a bad cam? No. In a big inch high compression engine, it'll stretch your arms and make you smile. The biggest takeaway here is that you'll get the best results if you choose a cam that is appropriate for your engine and, just as importantly, your riding style. Watching this video isn't going to make you an automotive engineer, but I've shown you the basics of how you can compare different cams by their most important specifications. You should be able to get a pretty good idea of which cam would be the most appropriate for your specific engine. Of course, if you're considering an S&S cam and you have questions, you can always call and ask our tech department for advice. I'm sure you've noticed that most cam spec tables contain other specifications that we haven't talked about here. I'll be talking about those specs in the next video, and you can watch that right now by clicking on this link. We hope you found this video useful and informative, and if you'd like to be notified whenever S&S releases a new video, just subscribe to the S&S channel. Thanks for watching.